Today, we are welcoming you to a deep dive that is going to, completely shatter how you look at that humble piece of food. The mission of our deep dive today is not about gardening or, agriculture.
No, definitely not.
It is about how this single specific fruit became a supreme technology of survival, and how that survival tech was so powerful it actually shaped human consciousness, dictating our concepts of morality and giving birth to our oldest stories.
Yeah, to really grasp the magnitude of this, we have to kind of put ourselves in the mindset of ancient populations
Mm.
before modern conveniences, before mechanized agriculture or global supply chains.
Right, where you can just ship produce across the world overnight.
Exactly. Ancient people were incredibly acute observers of the biological quirks of nature. Their lives literally depended on noticing these microscopic differences in how plants behaved. So they translated those botanical realities into the vocabulary of their daily survival.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you look at the ancient world, there were plenty of fruits out there, right? Pomegranates, figs, dates, plum.
Oh, absolutely. They were heavily consumed.
So why did the apple specifically stand out against every other fruit in the ancient world? What made it the undisputed king of the botanical world?
Well, it really comes down to a biological mechanism that our sources refer to as the respiration divergence.
It's a respiration divergence. Go.
Yeah, because to understand the mythological reverence for the apple, we first have to understand the brutal reality of ancient survival. Winter was not merely an inconvenience. It was basically synonymous with starvation.
Right, winter wasn't just, time to put on a sweater and drink hot cocoa. It was more like, the earth is dead and we might die too.
That is the exact reality.
Yeah.
So if we look at the data from the biological contrast in our sources, on one side of the divergence, you have fruits like apricots, plums, and figs.
Okay.
And these fruits undergo what botanists call rapid respiration. They experience a volatile, almost violent energy burn.
Oh, so the second they are plucked from the branch, they just start consuming their own internal sugars?
Exactly, at an incredibly high rate. They succumb to microbial decomposition within days.
Yeah.
The sources actually describe this as summer transience.
Which makes sense. Like, if you have ever left a ripe plum on your counter for 3 days, it turns into a sad, mushy puddle.
Right. They're fleeting sensory privileges of the warm months. You enjoy them for a week, and then they're gone. But on the exact opposite side of that biological divergence, you have Malus domestica. The apple utilizes slow respiration.
Slow respiration, so it downregulates its metabolism.
Yes, exactly. It actively conserves its sugars,
Yeah.
retains its cellular structure, and acts as what our sources call a winter survival vault.
So if a plum is like a leaky battery that drains immediately, the apple was essentially the ancient world's vacuum-sealed Tupperware, like a biological canned good.
That is precisely how it functioned.
Yeah.
It was natural preservation technology. And the mechanics of how it does this are fascinating. The apple develops a natural waxy cuticle on its skin that traps its internal moisture.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And at the same time, it tightly controls the release of ethylene gas, which is the hormone responsible for ripening.
So by slowing down that ethylene production in cool temperatures, it puts itself into suspended animation.
Exactly. And for nomads, pastoralists, and maritime travelers, a self-preserving fruit must have been nothing short of a miracle.
The sources talk about how the apple is this incredibly dense pocket of essential vitamins. You could pack these into rough woolen travel sacks and carry them across the freezing stretches of the Silk Road.
Or you could just stack them in dark root cellars beneath early settlements. If you kept them cool, those apples would sit there for 6 to 9 months without losing their vital moisture or structural rigidity.
6 to 9 months. I want you to imagine being an ancient traveler. You are hundreds of miles from home, facing freezing starvation.
And the frost has locked the soil hard as iron.
Right. Green vegetation ceased to exist months ago. You reach into your sack and you pull out this perfectly crisp, hydrating fruit.
It hasn't turned to mush or molded at all.
No, it still snaps when you bite into it. That isn't just a snack at that point. That is literally life-saving technology.
It was the literal difference between surviving the winter and perishing in the snow. The apples stubbornly refused to decay when everything else in the natural world was dying.
And if ancient people realized this fruit could literally cheat death in the physical world, it makes perfect sense that they projected that power onto the spiritual world.
Oh, absolutely. A biological fact of preservation inevitably morphs into a mythology of immortality.
Which brings us to some of the most fascinating material in the source's Norse mythology. I always grew up assuming that gods like Thor and Odin just lived forever by default.
Most people do, yeah.
Yep.
But the sources reveal that the Norse deities weren't actually inherently immortal. Their youth was totally conditional.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals so much about humanity's relationship with nature. In the Nordic traditions, the entire pantheon relied on one specific figure, the goddess Idun.
Right, the guardian of the apples.
Yes, she was the sole guardian of an ash box containing magical golden apples. Whenever the gods felt the onset of age or the weariness of time, they had to go to Idun and consume these specific apples.
To restore their physical and mental strength, it is basically the ancient world's equivalent of a Botox subscription.
That is a great way to put it, yeah. If they didn't eat the apples, they would literally gray, wrinkle, and grow frail, just like regular mortals.
There is even that famous myth where Idun is kidnapped by a giant, and the gods instantly start aging and crumbling because they lost access to their fruit.
Exactly, and that physical decay of the gods in her absence is a direct one-to-one cultural translation of the apple's slow metabolic respiration.
Because the physical fruit didn't grow old or soften in the cellar, ancient humans logically concluded its spirit was fundamentally anti-aging.
Yes, it became the literal source of eternal youth for the deities. They are surviving the winter of their divine lives by consuming the ultimate preservation technology.
And this wasn't just an isolated Nordic concept either, because if we travel southward and look at Celtic mythology, they had a very similar obsession centered around a place called Emain Ablach,
Which was later Latinized in Arthurian legends as Avalon.
the famous Isle of Apples. In the Celtic narratives, Avalon was the ultimate realm of spiritual healing.
It is where King Arthur is taken to heal from his mortal wounds.
Yeah, but what really blew my mind reading through these sources was the specific mythological passport you needed to access that realm. You couldn't just build a boat and sail to Avalon.
No, the ocean wouldn't take you there.
You needed a silver branch bearing 3 miraculous apples. That physical object was your ticket to cross the boundary into the eternal spiritual otherworld.
And we have to ask why that specific passport was required. Why not a sword or a chalice or a golden coin?
Right. Why an apple brand?
Because to hold that apple branch was to hold the ultimate key to a realm where decay was permanently suspended. The Celtic Druids saw the apple remaining firm through the dark half of the year and decided it belonged to the other world.
So by carrying that branch, you are carrying the very symbol of suspended decay into a realm of suspended decay.
Precisely. It was a sympathetic magic ritual.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because this defiance of decay wasn't just observable from the outside, the waxy skin trapping the moisture.
Ancient mystics believed the absolute proof of its divine nature was actually physically hidden inside its core.
The hidden geometry of the seeds. Think about how you slice an apple normally in your kitchen. You cut it vertically from the stem at the top down to the base.
Right, you get those 2 little seed pockets.
But if you take a knife and slice an apple horizontally right through its equator, the seed chambers aren't just arranged randomly.
No, they form a perfect, symmetrical, 5-pointed star.
A pentagram, naturally encased in the flesh of the fruit.
And in earth-centered and early Semitic esoteric traditions, finding that hidden mathematical geometry embedded inside the flesh of a fruit was a profound revelation.
I have to push back here, though. I really want to play devil's advocate.
Sure, go ahead.
Humans are notoriously pattern-seeking animals. We see faces in the clouds, right? Pareidolia is a documented psychological phenomenon.
Oh, definitely.
Are we absolutely sure that ancient mystics actually viewed this pentagram as a deliberate divine signature? Or is this just modern historians projecting retroactive meaning onto a neat biological coincidence?
That is a completely fair skepticism. It is easy to dismiss it as ancient pareidolia.
Yeah.
But the historical sources confirm that this wasn't a passive observation. It was actively integrated into their magical and religious systems.
Really?
Yeah. You have to remember the context of the ancient world. It was a chaotic, unpredictable place where disease and starvation struck without warning. So in that environment, geometry and mathematics were seen as the absolute highest forms of divine truth.
Because they were unchanging.
Exactly. They represented cosmic order.
So finding a perfect geometric star hidden inside the exact same fruit that kept you alive through the brutal winter, it wasn't just a fun party trick. It was theological evidence.
It solidified the apple's status as something profoundly sacred. The pentagram was a symbol of protection across the ancient Mediterranean long before it was co-opted by later occult movements.
So the fact that the ultimate survival fruit carried the ultimate symbol of protection inside its core meant,
To the ancient mind that the tree was a deliberate keeper of cosmic order, yes.
but being the keeper of cosmic order is a heavy crown to wear. Because the apple was already so firmly established as this supreme symbol of divine perfection, it feels like it became the perfect candidate for a massive cultural collision.
Oh, it became the ultimate narrative prop. And that collision happened precisely when Western religion was being codified and standardized for the masses.
We are talking about the 4th century CE translation of the Hebrew scriptures by a scholar named Jerome. This is a pivotal moment in the sources.
Yeah, Jerome was tasked by the Pope with translating the disparate Greek and Hebrew texts into one unified Latin version, which would eventually become the Vulgate.
Right.
And when he reached the book of Genesis and encountered the concept of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he made a linguistic choice that altered Western art, literature, and psychology forever.
Let's look closely at the data from the linguistic breakdown in our sources, because the stakes of this translation are wild. The original Hebrew text never actually specifies what kind of fruit is on the tree.
No, it just says fruit. Could have been a fig, a pomegranate, anything.
But Jerome chose to translate the concept using the Latin word malum.
And malum is a highly versatile Latin noun. In one context, it translates broadly to evil. Specifically, it denotes moral corruption, transgression, or spiritual ruin.
But, and this is where the history of linguistics gets almost laughably dramatic, malum also happens to share an identical phonetic and orthographic spelling with another completely different Latin noun.
Yes, malum, meaning apple.
The resilient, fruitful tree of the Rosaceae family.
What is fascinating here is that scholars have debated for centuries whether this was an accident, a typo of monumental proportions, or a deliberate choice.
The consensus in our sources leans heavily toward it being an intentional pun, right?
Yes, Jerome was an incredibly erudite scholar. He knew exactly what he was doing. By using the word malum, he permanently fused the physical fruit with the abstract concept of high-stakes moral judgment.
It is the ultimate double entendre. You have malum, meaning the ultimate spiritual ruin of humanity, and malum, meaning the apple you eat for breakfast.
And Jerome wasn't making this joke in a cultural vacuum either. The sources point out that this Latin translation was happening in a Greco-Roman world that already had deep anxieties about apples.
Specifically, the Mediterranean memory of the Greek apple of discord.
The famous golden apple of Eris, exactly.
Yes. Eris was the Greek goddess of discord and strife. After being snubbed at a massive divine wedding banquet, she tosses a golden apple into the middle of the party with the words, "To the fairest," inscribed on it.
And Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite all claim it.
Which forces a human, Paris of Troy, to judge who is the most beautiful. Aphrodite bribes him, he gives her the apple, and that singular choice literally ignites the Trojan War.
Notice why Eris chose an apple. She didn't throw a golden fig or a golden date into the banquet.
Right, why an apple?
Because the apple was already universally recognized as a symbol of ultimate value, immortality, and divine perfection, it was the only object valuable enough to make three goddesses lose their minds with vanity.
Wow. So when you combine the cultural weight of the Greek apple of discord with Jerome's Latin translation equating the apple to moral ruin, you get this incredibly powerful, inescapable synthesis.
The apple tree is no longer just a biological winter vault keeping nomads alive. It is no longer just the Celtic passport to a healing otherworld.
It becomes the definitive structural marker in Western mythology. It marks the exact boundary line where humanity transitions from unconscious innocence to conscious accountability.
You eat the fruit, and you are no longer an innocent animal living in harmony with a garden. You are awake. You are aware of your own mortality, your own nakedness.
You have to make choices, and those choices have world-ending consequences.
It represents the terrifying weight of knowledge. The apple, entirely because of its metabolic resilience and hidden geometry, was already the most important botanical specimen.
So the linguistic conflation of malum just shifted its ultimate meaning from physical survival against the winter to moral survival against our own nature.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for us today? Let's synthesize this journey. We started with Malus domestica, a fruit that simply evolved a biological mechanism to slow down its respiration and conserve its sugars.
And that biological winter vault became the difference between life and death, keeping Silk Road nomads and ancient pastoralists alive when everything else was frozen beneath the snow.
That very real, tangible survival tech inspired the concept of eternal youth for the Norse gods, who needed Idun's harvest to stave off their own withering.
It became the magical silver branch that served as a passport to the suspended decay of the Celtic Avalon.
It held a five-pointed geometric star in its core that proved its sacredness to ancient mystics. And eventually, because it was so culturally massive, it became the ultimate symbol of human morality and the loss of innocence.
Cemented forever by a brilliant Latin translation crook. Knowledge is most valuable when we apply it to how we view our world right now.
Absolutely.
The story of the apple is a masterclass in how human civilization processes its environment. It proves that our most profound, high-minded myths are very often just poetic codifications of the natural world surviving against the odds.
It is humanity trying to articulate a deep existential gratitude for the simple things that keep us alive in the dark. It certainly makes you look at that slightly bruised piece of fruit sitting on your kitchen counter completely differently.
It isn't just a snack, it is a monument to human survival and imagination.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. If ancient humans built entire pantheons, envisioned immortal realms, and constructed the very concepts of moral accountability around the simple metabolic resilience of a piece of fruit, what everyday miracles of modern technology or preservation are sitting in your home right now, totally taken for granted? What completely ordinary object in your life today might become the magical foundational myth of a civilization thousands of years in the future?